Hi everyone and welcome back. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about water-soluble graphite. I haven't actually made a video on water-soluble graphite, so this is going to be the first one and probably the last as well, which kind of suggests my feelings on water-soluble graphite straight from the off there. But somebody did ask me a question on Patreon the other day if I'd ever used, I can't remember the name of it now, Derwent, I think it's pronounced, water-soluble graphite. It basically comes in paint tubes and you squeeze it out and it's water soluble when you paint with it. Haven't actually used that product before, but I have actually used, well, I'll introduce you to them straight away. I've used the Derwent Graphitone, which is the centre column just here. I'll just show you these first. What I've done a little swatch, and then with the paintbrush, a wet paintbrush, I just wet half of it and pulled the graphite across, so you can roughly see the tone that you get from the original graphite to the wet graphite. Okay. Now you can probably see a few slight variations here and there with some of the tones, but they're very much of a muchness. I've got the regular Derwent wood case water-soluble pencils just here, the Graphitone like I just mentioned, and these are Faber Castell. Just quickly bring those in and show you those water-soluble pencils there, and that's the tin that they come in. Now the Graphitone are not a wood case pencil, they're a solid graphite stick, so they're a woodless pencil as it were. They've got this paper coating on it which you just peel off as soon as you start to sharpen down as they wear away. Now these are pretty good actually, and these were actually the first ones I ever bought, and as you can see I haven't even peeled any paper away yet. That's how much I've used them. I've probably done 3 or 4, half a dozen maybe, pictures with them, and none of them I was absolutely thrilled with because I just generally don't like the nature of water-soluble graphite. Not really my thing. But I thought, I'd share my experience of it with you, because there's obviously some interest out there, with people asking questions about it. So, yeah, so the Derwent Graphitone is a good one to get, along with the Faber Castell. I think the Derwent wood case pencils don't really dissolve quite as well. You can see it there, look, where I've actually wet the graphite itself and pulled it across, it's not really moved much at all, whereas the HB on the Faber Castell, it's almost dissolved back to clean paper. Well, not clean paper, but it's left a light patch there where the paper's beginning to show through, so it's obviously picked up that graphite and started to move it. And just generally as well, I think the 8B in the Faber Castell is a lot nicer than the 8B in the Derwent. It's just a richer, intenser, darker colour, and they do seem to flow better as well. So if you are thinking about getting some water-soluble pencils, they're the two that I would recommend. Can't speak up for the Derwent or any other brands because I've never used them. But in all honesty, I know this sounds a bit like I'm generalising here, and I am. The videos I've seen on YouTube of people using that Derwent and the Art Graph, that's another one. There's several out there, several different types, and they come in different guises, like pastes and in little tins and powder form, all sorts of different ways of producing water-soluble graphite. The artwork that I've seen done with them and the swatches that people do with them, they all seem to do the same thing to me. Doesn't matter what form they come in, whether it be a paste form, whether it be a block form, whatever, it just seems to do the same. And that's down to one particular reason. Now, a while ago I made a video on YouTube about graphite powder, and I was scraping some out and I was showing you how water soluble it can be as well. And somebody wrote in and said graphite isn't water soluble, it's a scientific impossibility for graphite to actually dissolve in water. And I thought, you've got that wrong, because manufacturers are selling us this stuff as water soluble graphite. So I went online, and that person was absolutely right. Graphite will not dissolve in water. It is a scientific impossibility. It will not dissolve. So all that's happening is the graphite particles are just being suspended and moved around in the water on the surface of your paper. And what seems to have the biggest effect is the actual binder that they're using with the graphite. So it's obviously a water-soluble binder that they're using with graphite, and that's why they're calling it water-soluble graphite. So that really got me thinking about, well, that's a bit strange. Well, in that case, if that was true, therefore regular graphite should mix into a paint just by scraping some graphite powder out on some paper, adding some water to it, and it will turn into a paint. And I actually demonstrated that on that previous video where I scraped some graphite powder down, added water to it, and it turned into a paint. So you can actually use regular graphite as water soluble graphite, but it doesn't seem to work quite as well in some cases. And I'm going to do a little bit of a demonstration for you right now, and we'll just have a quick look at the merits of graphite and water soluble graphite. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to use one of these. This is the Derwent natural graphite block. It's not sold as water soluble graphite, it's sold as natural graphite. And also you can buy exactly the same product but in larger, chunkier blocks with these Derwent XL graphite blocks. You get one that's very soft and one that's soft. There's one's lighter, one's darker, basically. But I'm not going to demonstrate these today because this is exactly the same thing. It's got exactly the same merits. There's no difference whatsoever apart from the size. So they're using exactly the same binder in this as they are in the XL blocks. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to scrape a little bit out just there in that corner, and I'm going to scrape some out on this corner. This is the darkest one actually that they do. They do 3 of them, and this is the darkest one I'm using. It'll show up a lot better on camera. So now I'm going to take the kitchen paper and I'm going to blend that in. Now that blends in really nice, look. I mean, that is gorgeous, isn't it? Really, really nice. Natural Cumberland graphite. For me, it doesn't get any better. It's so nice. Now, if we were to try and add water to that, in fact, let me just make sure it's completely rubbed in so I can see a few loose bits coming off there. So that's now all rubbed in. I can't really get too much more off of it, so that's on the paper. So now if I get a wet paintbrush and wet that, try and pull the graphite down so we can see it. A little bit's coming off, but it's not what you'd call water soluble. So I'd happily paint over that with watercolour and feel safe. The amount of water I use when I wet the entire surface of a paper compared to the volume of graphite that actually gets lifted off into the wash is negotiable, really. It's neither here nor there. But on the other hand, this powder down here, again with a clean wet brush, instant paint. Oh. And this is not sold as water soluble graphite, so it's all down to the binder. Now, if I use I must show you one other thing as well, just to prove a point as well, which I'm just about to show you. So if I get the paintbrush wet, clean and wet, or just damp, I can rub that along the end there. And get graphite that way, soluble graphite that way. So it's almost like a little watercolour block, isn't it, really, in itself. So there we go, that's the Derwent natural graphite. Now if I use what you've seen me use all the time, the Koh I Noor woodless pencil, and we do the same experiment, This is a 2B, by the way. It's not going to be quite as dark as that, or anywhere near as dark as that, but I should have probably got the darker one, which I've not got to hand at the minute, but I'll put a good bit down there anyway, so it's a fair test. And I'll put some more down here. Okay, and again I'll use a clean piece of kitchen paper and we'll blend this in there. We know what this does because we do this all the time. Again, the Koh I Noor graphite is gorgeous stuff. I mean, look at that. Fantastic, isn't it? It blends out lovely. And I'll just go to a clean piece there so it's all rubbed in and we haven't got any excess sitting on the surface. So now I'll do the same test again. And we'll wet half of it and pull some down. More water on the brush. We'll pull some down to see if we can get some graphite to move. Again, it's hardly anything, a little bit, but hardly anything. I'd still be happy to paint over that with washes of watercolour, you know, in the pencil and wash technique. So it's kind of strange, isn't it, that once it's pushed into the paper, it's less soluble, although, you know, soluble is the wrong word, but it's less movable, let's say. So that kind of suggests, you know, that graphite in itself isn't water soluble as such. It can only be suspended in water or a binder and moved around on the paper that way. You know, but when it's put on dry and it gets into the grain of the paper, it's only really if you probably scrub and lift will you actually sort of agitate that enough to come out into the washes of water. So the person that said, you know, graphite is not soluble in water is absolutely right. So again, we'll do the same test here. We'll see if we can turn this into paint. Having a little bit more of a job to get that to mix in fact. It's not mixing in quite so easily as the Derwent one, so there's obviously a difference in binder there. But still, the graphite is being suspended in whatever. Maybe the binder is not dissolving, but the graphite is just being picked up and suspended in the water, carried on the brush and put down just there, and that's the sort of impression of it that we're going to get. It does look a bit more scratchy compared to that one. That's kind of diffused out a little bit more, hasn't it? Let's add a little bit more water on there. Let's make a nice sort of, yeah, the graphite seems to be going to the edges a little bit more. It doesn't really want to get involved with the water too much there, does it? So there's obviously a difference in binder, but nonetheless both techniques are doable. You can still turn the powder into, you know, some form of paint. So now, with all that said, you're probably thinking, well, what's going to happen with the graphitone? Well, if I get, let's get a mid-toned one. Let's get the 4B. I've demonstrated this on one of my early videos. This is bizarre stuff. It won't blend in as graphite powder, and that's because of the binder in it. And we'll scrape a little bit down there as well. And when I say scrape, it doesn't really go into dust. It's like little shavings. It's not like regular graphite when we've scraped that off into powder. This is more like little shavings. It doesn't look anywhere near as fine as the other stuff. So I'm going to use a clean piece of tissue and I'm going to try and rub that in. And the same happened as last time, nothing, it just gets pushed to the side. It's made a little smear but nothing much, and that's a 4B and this one was only a 2B. I hardly put any down there, did I? Just to prove the point, I'll put more down there so we can get a fair test. But it's really just coming off in flakes, look. So let's get all those flakes together so we can get a concentrated area. I've got a little bit more that time, but I certainly wouldn't opt for that as a method of graphite powder anyway. It's way too light. You can see the shavings, look, and the binding sticking to the tissue. It's not good at all for that kind of thing. Now obviously there's almost no need to do this test because we know it's water soluble, so therefore that should mix into paint, and it does. Look, all the little shavings have kind of dissolved and we've made a paint there. Oh, I forgot one important thing about the Koh I Noor pencils actually. This was going to be the interesting bit as well, I forgot it. How I wet the stick, the graphite stick on the Derwent one to get that paint area there, I'm going to try to do the same on here. Now this kind of proves a point, because the binder that they're using in here is definitely not the same, because I was able to lift off graphite really easily with the other one, with a damp brush, but this, look, I'm really spending a long time on this, trying to get loads of graphite off, and I'll do it right next to it, look, and it's nothing. So nothing comes off when you actually wet these. Strange, isn't it? So that's down to the binder and not the graphite, because all graphite, or natural graphite on its own without any binder in it, will get carried in water, but it won't dissolve in water. So that's, I think that's fairly interesting actually, because if you've ever wanted to know what makes water soluble graphite and why we've got regular graphite, water soluble graphite, it's all graphite's the same, it's just the binder. So obviously we're going to get the same effect with the wood case pencils here. There's no need for me to actually rub the brush over the graphitone, because, well, I'll just do it just to show you. But obviously it's going to take off some pigment really easily and make paint, because it's water soluble, so we don't really need to even do that. Now one other thing I'd like to show you, which is fairly interesting, is this. It doesn't look fairly interesting, and it's not really, I don't know why I said that, but it's water soluble. I keep saying water soluble graphite. I mean, we'll use that term, water soluble graphite, because that's how we've all learnt to refer to it as, haven't we? So this is water soluble graphite that I made myself. It's very easy to do. It's something you could have a go at yourself if you're interested in these water-based graphite products that are out there. It's like I say, they're all the same. They all look the same to me, and the results look the same, purely because of the way the graphite gets suspended in the water. It just doesn't react like watercolour, it just reacts like mud, really. I don't think the effects are very nice at all. But this one I tried something different. I thought, I'm going to use graphite powder and I'm going to use proper watercolour binder and see if I can actually get the graphite to actually behave like a true watercolour. So what I done was I used the powder from the Koh I Noor graphite powder bottle that I've got. You may have seen me demonstrate that in another video. A lot of several manufacturers make graphite powder, but the one I've got is the Koh I Noor, and I thought that'd be a good one to get because I'm so used to it with the woodless pencils and the graphite powder that I use. But again, it didn't work very well, but it was water soluble. So what I'd done, I got some watercolour binder. In fact, some of you know that I actually make some of my own watercolour paints as well. I've made several batches of them, and the binders that I use to actually bind the watercolour, I actually use two different kinds. I actually use a proprietary one, which is made by Sennelier, which is everything already mixed in there, and all you have to do is mix the colour in there, or in my case I'll mix in the graphite in there. And that's all you need to do. It's as simple as that. Or you can mix your own binders with, I'll quickly show you now in case you're interested. It's very easy to do. All you need is some gum arabic, and that will be the main ingredients that you use. That will be the main ingredients that's actually in this one as well, the Sennelier binder that I use. You can get that anywhere, in any art shop, on eBay, Amazon. Where did I get this from? I think I got this from eBay. But good art shops will sell it, and you'll find it online as well. But it is quite expensive. But it's very good. So you can use gum arabic, with 1 drop of glycerine and a couple of drops of honey. Any honey will do, the cheap, nasty, generic honey, you know, that's fine. You don't have to put your best Manuka honey or acacia honey in or anything like that. Just a cheap, nasty, squeezy honey. Just put a few drops of that in. And the amount of this that you need is unimportant, really. There's no scientific measurements to it. I literally just pour it quick like that, and I get a little puddle of it, about that big. Then I just put 2 or 3 drops of honey and 1 drop of glycerin. Sometimes it's 2 drops, it all depends how it comes out, the dropper. But it really is not important. It's like I say, it's not rocket science, it's just a very rough thing. As long as you've got the larger quantity of gum arabic, it'll all be fine. Then you just mix all that in with the pigment or the graphite till it's all like a nice smooth paste. Then you just put it into pans or little bottles, whatever you want to use. I use pans here for the graphite, and let it set for a few days and you're good to go, and that's how easy it is. So, you know, I mean, try and have a go at making your own water-soluble graphite if you're really into that sort of thing, because a lot of these products that I've seen cost a fortune. You know, that dairy van being no exception, and the Artgraph, I can't remember what the company's called, their products are very expensive. And this, it doesn't get any cheaper. It really doesn't. You put the quantity of powder into the binder that you want, so you can put as much or as little in as you want, and obviously that's going to determine, you know, how rich and intense and dark the graphite is, and the same with the watercolour. So you could make a range of them in dark, medium and light. You know, it's entirely up to you. But I thought I'd just share that with you because it's a very cheap and a very easy way of getting good water-soluble graphite. And I'll just quickly demonstrate this for you because I personally think this is better than any of them that I've got. You're probably thinking, oh, you would say that because you made it yourself, but no, I'm not biased that way. I mean, if this was rubbish, I'd say, but I honestly think this is very good. It really is very good. And the fact that it's got a watercolour binder in there, oh, it's obviously mixing with the graphite that's next to it there, all these little droplets on the paper. It flows out nice on watercolour paper, but still it's not exactly like watercolour, purely because of the nature of the pigment itself, you know, graphite. It's not actually dissolving in the water and becoming part of the water. It's little particles suspended in the water, so they don't tend to float around and travel around and diffuse very well like watercolour pigments do. So it's not exactly the same, but I think it's still probably the best option if you're going to use a water-soluble product. You know, at least you know what's in it. You can remake it again and adjust the mix if you want to. You know, and you're in control of your products then, you know, instead of leaving it in the hands of manufacturers and charging you a fortune. And this is really, really cheap to make, and as you can see, it's dark. It flows quite nicely. You know, if we were to put water there, I mean, it doesn't flow like watercolour, but it will run around a little bit in water. And it gave me the best look for water-soluble graphite that I've managed to achieve out of any of the others. So that's definitely my recommendation for water-soluble graphite. And just a quick peek again at the chart. So I think that combined with a set of Faber Castell aquarelle pencils, and I think you'd be good to go. And also the Derwent, I keep calling them graphite sticks. Well, they are graphite sticks, aren't they? Sticks and blocks, I always get confused. Yeah, so these graphite sticks, like I say, you know, you can just put your brush on them and you get a very similar effect to that. It's, you know, probably gum arabic that's holding that together for all intents and purposes. It looks very much the same, doesn't it? So there you go. That's the that's my take on water-soluble graphite. Wasn't very interesting, I must admit, but it's like I say, graphite, water-soluble graphite is not really my thing. I've tried, I've persevered, but when I put it down there, I don't look at it and think, oh yeah, that's fantastic, let's, you know, get all, you know, creative now. Not like I do with graphite powder. As soon as I put dry graphite down, graphite powder, it's like I focus in, my mind shuts off, and it's like full on creativity mode. I'm just seeing things happening everywhere, and it really, really inspires me. But this doesn't give me any inspiration. It really doesn't. It always just looks messy to me, and that's why I don't use it. But don't let that put you off. Have a go. You know, you might be really given to this kind of medium. I don't see a lot of artists using it as their main first choice medium, or using it entirely on its own. I've seen artists use it with like water soluble coloured pencils and dry graphite and other things like that, but I think it's a difficult medium to control. Some artists seem to, you know, do a lovely job of it. I just don't. So that's why I sort of pass it by. But I always keep it and think, one day I'm going to do something nice with this. Something is going to happen and I'll get inspired to reuse it again. But until that day, it's just going to stay in my tin and gather dust. So there we go. So, hope that was helpful to you. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.